Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Mr. Snacks. This concept album is one 47-minute long song cut up into 4 main sections. It can take a while to progress, but this is intentional to match the overarching concept. We're going to be looking at some Meshuggah, their 5th album titled Catch 33. It is broken up into 4 main segments, as Mr. Snacks said, but it's also broken up into 13 specific tracks. Being that this isn't an album review, it's a special selection, we're going to go through the entire 47-minute thing, especially since there's no breaks in it, just in one shot. Listen to the whole thing. I'll have my thoughts on it at the end of this as usual, and then we'll dive into, 47 minutes of lyrics. I'm trying to think of past concept albums where we've had, lengthy tracks like this, and I think of like Mirror Reaper, I think of Frederick Thorndahl's Rejects, Defects, I don't remember what that group was called, but we checked out a pretty large album from them. Lyrics are a bit light. Kind of hoping that's true here because, 13 tracks of lyrics might take some time to get through. Anyways, let's kick this off. Time's going to be here. Titles of the specific tracks are going to be here. But like I said, we're going to listen to the whole thing at once. Let's dive into this. So primarily bouncing back and forth between 2 notes here. There is a 3rd tone that comes up every once in a while. We now have this tremolo picking over here. Of course, the polyrhythms, that's what Meshuggah is. Slight variation on the main riff. Also, there's a reset that just happened. That was interesting. So this is interesting. We basically had 2 verses here, except the verses are just in their own tracks. It's an interesting way to divide that up. Because this riff, the tremolo, the drum part, It's all the same stuff from track 1. Another slight variation. I do like the subtle evolution of the riff. I wonder if we're going to stick with that for the entirety of this.
Becomes my very shackles.
You really gotta like this riff. Golly, we're almost 4 or 5 minutes into this track and it's just this riff. I'll be honest, drone was not something I was expecting from Meshuggah. Sonic shift there. So we're still working on micro varieties. Meshuggah here really testing my patience with repeated phrases. Another slight variation here. We slowed down the ending, and kind of every other time through, we hold out one of the notes in the middle rather than push through with the riff itself. So the drone is shifting pitch, giving us an illusion, at least, of harmonic movement between two ideas, though this entire song has still been primarily within one chord. When I say this song, I mean everything we've heard so far. So this is going to be where the sections change, because last time we had just the drone. We kind of removed the core Meshuggah sound. It's also where we changed the riff. So the first 3 tracks were one group, the second group of 3 tracks was another, and here we're starting another set. Presumably we're going to be diving into a new riff here as well.
Gnawing voraciously at the bones.
Okay, this is kind of fun.
Skeletal patchwork, protecting my own reflection within the twin insane, engaged in the mirrored act of chewing away at the shell of my attacking self. The paradox, unseen, treacherous, this deceit. To make no choice matter, to having yet lose yourself, until finally all reasons why are forgotten. To live through one's own shadow, mute and blinded, is to really see eclipse the golden mirror, and their reflection is set free.
Ooh, that's spooky. Just straight up police sirens at this point. So very concrete gent style writing for half this album, and then a random deviation into abstract art. We'll get back into the Meshuggah stuff now. Okay.
Now
Also, 13 minutes for this one. They have a lot to say in this moment, I suppose. They wanted to self-contain within a single track. It sounds like a spring. I kind of like the more compressed one where I could hear the textures of it more than the raw tone. You know, this tremolo picking has come up underneath the gent riff quite often within this album. I don't think it's tremolo. I honestly think there is a steady pulse to that. Maybe 16? I don't know. I suspected it back on track 4 where we had just the right guitar solo. But I think listening here, I hear a consistent rhythmic value. It's kind of wild. And we're back to some ambiance. So obviously the title of this album is in reference to Catch-22, a predicament where the only solution is nullified by the predicament itself. Or I should say all the solutions are nullified by the predicament itself. I've been trying to figure out how this pairs with an album that does two incredibly opposing ideas, though they overlap. Every moment of this album is atmosphere, whether it is ambient atmosphere or djenty-driven atmosphere. Atmosphere is the only ruling factor here. What does that have to do with Catch-22, and what is a Catch-33? I will say, though, it is kind of impressive how at multiple occasions we have been in chromatic scales such as this. And they're making it sound interesting-esque. It's like chromatic mystery. I'm being drawn in. I want to know where it goes, but ultimately I already know where it's going to end up. It's just the illusion of mystery. They are certainly trying my patience today, though. Alright, Meshuggah, pick up the pace. Let's do something. Cool. Gotta give them credit though. Somehow they capture the same vibe, whether they're doing the djenty stuff or this ambient quasi-melodic sections. It doesn't really feel like they're doing anything different. The end result is the same despite doing it in a drastically different manner. That's just annoying. Not the first thing they've done though, so I guess it's just par for the course. Oh, this is one of the best moments of the track so far. It feels like it wants to lean into like a psychedelic space thing, and the guitars quit before we got there. We could have had some sick melody on top of this from that solo guitars, and they quit before they even made it to the first hurdle. Okay, that's a cool idea. Nice little transition there using that melodic riff. A nice shift here with very minimal drumming underneath. I mean, we have the constant bass kicks, but what the cymbals and snare are doing are quite a bit more minimal than usual. We're back to the usual stuff though, very short-lived. Final 7 minutes. I feel like this riff is a callback to something from previously, but how much of this album just blends together? I can't place it. And that's if it even is not, if it is something that is adapted from or a callback to something older. It could still be something completely fresh. This feels rather final, but there's still so much time left. And the interesting thing is, this is just a minimal version of the riffs themselves, which focus around 2, sometimes 3 main accent points. This is just, what if we play the accent points without any of the in-between notes, without any of the pedal tones that go between them? This is almost directly lined up with just the previous riff. Just a hyper minimal take on that, only bringing about what is intensely important to its identity. From a harmonic standpoint, looking at the key tones of the riff, it's going to be 5 minutes of this, isn't it? Oh, okay, okay. I'll take a little variation. And the less stable and unstable chords had to have shown up somewhere, as they have consistently done so in the more ambient areas. I have survived the Meshuggah album. I find it wild that I had less to say in the moments of this album than even Mirror Reaper. Granted, Mirror Reaper is almost twice as long as this, but I just felt like there were more elements to that to bring up discussion during the reaction itself. And through that lens, I'm honestly waiting to see how many people just reply back to this. Dude, the reaction was boring. You were just standing there for 40 minutes. Yeah, dude, I was. What Meshuggah did within the first 3 minutes of the album is pretty much the same thing they did in every grouping of 3 minutes of this album. It's what they did throughout it. It's what they did at the end. Meshuggah does what Meshuggah does well. There aren't many bands who do this at this level, but they don't really deviate from that either. I could have heard the first couple of tracks, 1 minute each, like 5 minutes in total. And I don't think my analysis would be too different after having heard all of it. Everything that I learned about this album, I learned within the opening, tenth of it. The rest of it didn't expand on what it was doing. It just continued to do more of it. And that is a blessing and a curse. If you really like this album is absolutely going to press your buttons in the best kind of ways. I certainly listen to, pop punk and post-hardcore albums and grunge albums that don't really change much throughout. I love the sound. I'm glad they stick with it. The little variations, the little differences between the tracks, the different hooks or the different, chords or different atmospheres. They're small enough of a change to keep me interested because I enjoy the general sound. So if you like what Meshuggah is doing and you just want to groove, they got you covered. Now, if you're like me and you weren't on board with the first 3 minutes, the rest of it is excruciatingly boring. Now, that isn't to discredit them. Objectively, this is fascinating. And there's a lot to dig into if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of all of it. But subjectively, I could not have come up with anything that would have been less entertaining to me. Except for pure noise, but they even went into that direction at times as well. They just balanced that out a little bit with the gent stuff. So, also I just called Meshuggah boring. So let's see, 52 minutes into this video, I'm going to check the analytics. I'm going to see if there's a very sharp drop off where people are like, this guy's an idiot. Click away. Not listening to him anymore. And this is how I get fandoms upset at me. Raw honesty. Okay. I do have some things I want to talk about. This video is probably going to go on for another 20 or 30 minutes. Didn't even think about lyrics. So yeah, we got a bit ahead of us. I'm going to try not to ramble on too much and hit the main points so that we can get through this and it doesn't end up being a gargantuan video. But if anyone listened to that all the way through with me, congratulations, you made it through the whole reaction. And if you enjoyed it, fabulous. I love it. Glad that if you've never heard of them before, I'm glad you found something you really liked. If you didn't enjoy that, well, you endured it with me. And we're in this club together of getting through a song that didn't quite catch our fancy. And we made it through the endurance track. Oh, man. All right. The very first topic I want to bring up is the minor variations. I mentioned this towards the beginning of the track. I found it out around track 6-ish or so, 7 maybe, where the first 3 tracks all focused on one riff that they applied small variation to. We get to track 4, we get a new riff, and then all, the 4, 5, and 6 here are all based around this riff with minor variations on this. This kind of continued on, though I found it was less predictable as a pattern as we began to introduce less metallic sections and more ambient sections, and that kind of broke things up, especially with the end of In Death being an incredibly long ambient section, and I kind of forgot what the general riff was from the beginning of that track to see if it carried on into Shed, which came in after it. And by that point, there's only 3 tracks left, and there's some similarities, but I had completely forgot about this entire thing to be comparing riffs in the final 10 minutes of the album or so. But certainly on the first half of this album, there's this idea of take a riff. This is the core idea right here. After a while, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes of playing it, we're going to play it with added notes in it or removed notes in it, or the rhythmic cadence is going to shift. Instead of accenting on 1, the and of 3, and then 2, and then 4, and then the and of 2 again, and then 3 here. Because, they got to be in these really long ideas, which is all part of this polymetric stuff that we'll talk about in a second. But you have this really long phrase. And instead of having all these accent points, what if this one was delayed a little bit? What if this one came in a little early? And you're going to change up the general flow of it without actually changing the notes. The note order is the same, just how long you hold on to each of the notes is going to vary. But again, sometimes we can remove notes. Sometimes we can add notes in. Sometimes we can make it more dense. We can make it less dense. We can stretch it out. We can slow the time down. There's lots of ways to manipulate the riff, and they go through a lot of them. It allows many of these tracks to feel consistent, to feel connected, but also to feel unique, where each of these micro movements has its own identity, but it's all based off of this original blueprint that we've evolved and grown from. I do like that. And even there at the end, in the final track, I asked, is this a callback? Because it did sound familiar. But as I admitted, a lot of these tracks have just blurred together because the general template and blueprint of this entire album is identical. So we have this idea of variations on a core theme, and the theme gets changed every few minutes or so. So we have this cool little idea of progression here. This is part of the blueprint. The other part of the blueprint is the rhythm. This is where Polymeter comes in. Polymeter is different than polyrhythm. Polyrhythm implies that you are playing X amount of notes in the same span that Y amount of notes are being played in. So if you have a 3 against 2 polyrhythm, you're getting 3 notes at the same time as 2 notes. You got 3 on one hand, 2 on the other, but they're both within the same span of time. When you get to polymeter, though, you're actually going to be crossing bar lines because you're going to be working with 2 different or distinct time signatures. So you might have a 4-beat bar. So we're working in the 4/4 time signature. And you might have 4 of those, which is 16 beats. This is incredibly standard. You're going to hear this in music all over, everywhere. It's just such a common way to write music, the 4-bar phrase in 4/4. But instead of breaking it up into 4 equal bars of 4, what if we did 5, 5, 5, 1? Well, the 5 is going to be weird because they're going to be locked in 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's going to go back to 1, but this one's going to go to 5. And then we're going to have 2 and 1, 3 and 2, 4 and 3. And see how they get out of sync? That's what happens with Polymeter. Except when it comes to Meshuggah, they're working on like 32-bar phrases. And they're finding ways for everything to re-sync up at the end of the 32 bars. Or 32 beats if they are working with like 8-bar phrases, or whatever their large scope is. And they do work with really large scopes. The general beat, the heartbeat of the track, what the metronome would be playing based off of their tempo and time signature, is going to slip in and out of sync with the core rhythmic pulse of the drums and the guitar, giving us these really syncopated and jagged rhythmic devices. And like I said, they're going to slip in and out of sync with each other, sometimes even just barely missing each other, where one comes in just after the metronome beat or just before, not even like half of a beat, but we could be talking about a quarter of a beat too. Just barely missing, locking in together. This is what creates a lot of the groove to this, is the element of syncopation, of playing or even accenting to put extra oomph on places that aren't the downbeats that the metronome is counting. This is what Meshuggah is based all around, but instead of lining back up after every 2 bars or 4 bars, we're lining up after 8 bars, 16 bars, 32 bars. It's taking so long for everything to sync back up. And that's how it feels like Meshuggah is always playing in weird time signatures, even though a majority of their music is in 4/4. They're just not playing in 4/4. They're lining back up on 4/4 eventually, sometime down the road, they'll line back up on it. And that's why a lot of their music just is difficult to follow along to. But if you listen in most of this, you pay attention to a crash cymbal, a splash cymbal, a hi-hat, you're going to get a steady beat, maybe every other beat, maybe every beat. It's going to give you the core pulse. And if you lock into that, you can feel how everything else is dancing around this core pulse over here. That's really the entirety of what I get out of Meshuggah. Now, granted, I've heard this, Clockwork, and Bleed, and I think that's it. So it's not like I've heard everything they've ever made, but everything that I have heard is this one idea. I haven't really heard a lot of variation out of Meshuggah's output. And so this song ends up being polymetric ideas and slight riff variation. And then, of course, we do have the guitarist off on the right playing 16th note, just creating texture like a black metal thing underneath everything. It just creates this constant drone underneath this this gentiness in order to create this buzz, this atmosphere, to fill in the space that's not filled in by the rhythmic syncopation. And then you have your vocalist just screaming. And actually, this is a good segue here. The vocalist and the guitars are the two melodic associated instruments. Neither one of them really engages with melody. The vocalist does have some perceived pitch variation. They seem to be able to create 2, maybe 3 distinct tones. Now it's all false chord. We're not actually using our vocal cord, so there is no pitch, but because of all the clashing sound waves being created, we have overtones and undertones, and that's coming into our ears, and our brains are trying to interpret it, and it ends up hearing pitch out of it. And so you can kind of hear a little bit of movement. It's not just completely solid like, you know, a 2000s metalcore vocalist. It's just like one pitch all the time, totally monotone, just really hitting this one thing. There's a little bit of movement to it, but it's not really the core element. You get the compression, you get that texture, you get the rhythmic element. The same is actually true for the guitar, though instead of perceived pitch, we actually have true pitch here. The guitar typically takes 2 pitches, sometimes a third, and just bounces between them. Bum, 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 bum. It's jagged, it's rhythmic. That's the main focus of it, is this polymetric stuff. But we do have pitches here. They're not really melodies, though. It's just jumping back and forth between 2 tones. And so this album doesn't really have much melody at all. There are some quasi-melodic moments. We had something that sounded like a distorted bagpipe at one time. Something that was kind of like a compressed violin. I don't know if this was all digital or maybe effect pedals on a guitar to get these sounds. I don't know what the true instrument was. They certainly deviated from the bass and 2 guitar tones that we've heard through a pretty prevalent amount of this album. These rogue instruments kind of veered into more melodic directions, but frequently also landed on just a handful of notes and bouncing between them rather than having smooth melodic flow. It was nice at times though, and like I said, coming into, I think it was maybe it was Dehumanization. It was one of the last couple of tracks. I liked where it was going, kind of had like this spacey thing going on, psychedelic space sounds. But all we got were 2 or 3 notes, and then some space, and then 2 or 3 other notes. I'm like, oh, you know, we're building melodic ideas. We have another trio of notes here. This is all connecting into something cool. And then that instrument just quit playing, instead of expanding that idea and beginning to fill in space. And that's because Meshuggah doesn't care about melody. This isn't a melodic band. I shouldn't have expected it, but they sort of teased a little bit of that direction. I'm going to say we were both at fault there. But we have these rogue moments that kind of lean a little towards the melodic side, kind of nudge in that direction, but never actually go there. And so we end up with a track of 47 minutes of Polymeter. Polymeter and texture. It's not incredibly diverse. There's not a lot of contrast on this. There's very little, or I'd argue no melody on this. It's exactly what I say when I say djent is not a genre. Djent is a spice. Djent is the cinnamon of metal. You can certainly add it to a recipe, but do not just try to eat a spoonful of cinnamon. It's not going to go well. Making only djent is not fun. At least not for me. That's my subjective take on it. If you enjoy pure djent, go for it. Have a blast. There's bands out there. You're going to love them. To me, I cannot wrap my mind around this. This just isn't fun for me. It's like eating a spice rather than putting a spice in a meal. And I think it's one of those things that I can appreciate that people enjoy it, but I'm so far divorced from that mindset that it makes no sense to me. Aside from the fact that, I can put myself in y'all's shoes. I like music that other people don't understand. So obviously the vice versa, must be true as well. Y'all like this just the way that I like weird stuff that no one else does. But I can't get into that perspective of enjoying this. I find very little or almost none of this enjoyable besides the puzzle box element of it, which I suppose I need to bring up real quick. There is a very cool element here of what's the phrasing on this? Is this really 4/4? How are they working within that? What kind of polymeter are we looking at? To hear this by ear and transcribe it and write it down on paper, the rhythmic devices and figuring out the phrases and the polymeters and what kind of tuplets they're working with at different places in order to achieve the rhythmic syncopation they do. Yeah, dude, that would be very cool to do. And maybe even applying this to playing it as well, to not only understand the rhythms, but to master them innately so that you can play them back. Not for, at least for me anyways, not for the enjoyment of playing it, because again, the music just doesn't click for me. It doesn't push any of my buttons in a positive way. But it would be very cool to say, look, I understand what they're doing. It's super complex, and I have forced the electricity through the meat in my body in order to replicate these really wild and lengthy phrases. And there's sort of a mastery over the music element that I think would be pretty cool. The puzzle element of solving the song. That is something that I've always enjoyed about more complex rhythmic works, including stuff like the wilder side of Dillinger Escape Plan or Car Bomb. Meshuggah certainly fits in that same area. So I suppose there's always that. There is one other side to this, though. It is a concept album, and they like to play with concepts. We isolated the drone over here as a transition. I think it was like a full 2-minute song, though, which is whatever, dude. But we also had some vocoder stuff going on in here. What else did I write down? Oh, yeah, dude, the ambient sections in general, just kind of playing sounds. These were the most melodic sections, but they were also the most harmonically dissonant, lacking of harmonic stability almost entirely, with several of these moments, at least to my ears, leaning into the chromatic scale, which simply means that instead of picking specific keys on a keyboard or specific notes in order to craft a chord, which is how we end up with major chords that sound brighter and minor chords that sound sadder, we're just going to play all of them. It kind of loses its identity because it's everything. Instead of taking a couple of colors out of the crayon box in order to draw or color something, I'm just going to grab the entire contents of the box and just draw these big circles. It's kind of lacking in colored identity there. You haven't chosen warmer tones, you haven't chosen earthier tones or autumn tones or anything like that in order to convey a feeling. It's everything. And music is the same way. We choose specific notes to imply specific feelings, and when you don't choose specific notes and you pick them all, it just becomes this sound. And that's what chromatic is. It's everything. And that's what these moments are, but it's also an intentionality of disharmony too, or dissonant harmony, where the note choices that are playing simultaneously are always unstable. I found very few passages on this album where they went for more consonant harmony, where the notes gelled well together. There was always some sort of clashing idea here, which is interesting because we don't hear too much of that throughout the rest of the track. The drone that sits underneath the djenty ideas, there's not a lot of harmonic clashing there. They just work together. But in these moments, they specifically look for harmonies that clash. And I wonder if that's because there is more of a melodic focus here. Notes are changing. Well, if we got to focus on notes themselves rather than rhythms, we might as well make this awkward too. So we made our rhythms difficult to decipher. Let's move away from more traditional harmonies here. And that's kind of what I meant earlier when I said that the ambient sections are kind of just like the traditional metal sections on this. It is a push away from standard sounds, this time harmonic instead of rhythmic, while also focusing on core beat passages. There is a rhythmic jaggedness even though we don't have a core backbeat, even though we don't have everything that fits between. I explained this at the end in that final track when we broke it down to just 2 beats. Some space, and then bum, bum. Bum, bum. That specific cadence was present in the previous riff. Those were the 2 notes that the guitars accented, usually with the snare as well, to present these 2 main hits, and then there was other stuff to fill in the space between those main hits, but they had more oomph to them, more impact. They were accented. The music brought your attention to those. We just stripped away all the context to that. Now all you get is this. And we saw this in the ambience as well, focusing on rhythmic cadence that would fit something that they had played previously, just without the context around it. You lose the syncopation because we don't have the backbeat for the syncopation to be contextualized against. Now you just have 2 rogue or 3 rogue notes in nothingness. It is still jagged, it is still syncopated. You just have to imagine, put those beats back in your mind. But harmonically, it's also unstable as well, and kind of difficult to understand what they're going for given the heavy dissonance and chromatic scale they're using. A lot of it is about moving outside of the general realms of how harmony is used to convey emotion and to tell story and to create something more abstract. It is neat. It, to me, kind of feels more in the realm of free-form jazz or free-form electronic music than anything else. Maybe even a little bit of avant-garde style rock or metal. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but abstract art does that for a lot of people. Sometimes you look at something abstract and it just makes you start crying. You don't know why. You don't know what it reminds you of. Other times you'll look at something abstract and it's just that, it's abstract. You don't have any concrete idea to pair it to. And a lot of Meshuggah's ambient passages on this album, for me, just ended up being that sort of distant, disconnected abstraction, which of course is a skill issue on my part. When it comes to abstract art, it's just as much about what the viewer participates in the art as, what kind of biases and information and experiences they bring to it to understand what it's doing, just as much as what the artist put into it as an abstract concept. The fact that I didn't really get much out of these moments says just as much about me as it does about the music. I'd be really curious what other people enjoyed about these sections, if they got anything out of them, if they feel a strong connection to them, or even if you enjoy the metallic parts of this but find the ambient sections to be a bit of a downer. Maybe you're vice versa. Maybe you really love the ambient sections and the metal stuff isn't your jam. I love seeing other people's perspective on stuff, especially something like this that I just don't get. I didn't connect with, I didn't enjoy. It's not even like, yeah, I like this moment. There's just like very little in here that's for me. Meshuggah makes music that is for the anti-Bryan. And, I appreciate that about them. Not everything needs to be for me. I've expressed that in the past, but this is one of those things where I can't even find something in it that I enjoyed. It's very rare. And that's both wild, but a part of what makes music and art in general so great. There's such a wide palette, a wide element, just a lot of art out there. And some of it is just going to be not for you or not for me in totality. And it's very rare for me to find something like that. Meshuggah hit it, and that makes it, in my books at least, rather unique. The last thing, yeah, I'm just going to do it real quick. I don't have much to add to this, but this is a slow album. It takes its time. I mentioned multiple times it tests my patience. It is completely driven in some places. You can just feel it is going towards a direction. Then it'll just sit nowhere for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes doing one thing on loop. Just really enjoying this moment, not really doing much. Sometimes it is a more complex riff that they just wanted to play for several minutes, but sometimes it's just an empty field of music. Very minimal, very ambient, not much going on. And they're like, hey, we're going to spend about 5 minutes here. I hope you're cool with that. And if you're not, there's the door, buddy. And it takes its time. And there's a lot of repetition on here. And it certainly didn't help me enjoy this album at all. But it is a strong identity of this album, is how willing it is to just be in places. I'm going to go read some lyrics, see what's going on there. Interestingly, the lyrics are a bit more philosophical than I expected. I don't know if they are truly profound or just seemingly profound, but there is at least a want for depth, though I do find a lot of it to sort of be like the music in that it just continues to re-engage similar ideas. The album lyrically, for me, doesn't really begin to move in any direction until we're a third of the way through. The first couple of tracks all focus on the setup for this, a want for redemption through evolution. And this evolution is one of spirituality, meditation, and rebirth. All of this may be to represent a true borning anew. But it could simply be about shedding the past and growing in maturity, to say that's who I was. I have changed since then. I now look back on who I was and blank. I liked who that was. I didn't like who that was, whatever, but that is a past me in sort of more of a literal sense, to have grown out of a former self. But it does say that it reaches for inner brightness in order to find this, as I am guided by fear, blinding outside all shades of the perfect black. So he says that surrounds me is darkness, and I'm looking for an inner brightness to combat that. This, I think, is where the meditative part comes in, to find growth from within. That's the first track right there. Now, there is a concept of falsehoods all throughout this. So the second track says that there's a scattered jigsaw of my redemption laid out before my eyes, each piece as amorphous as the other, each piece in its lack of shape a lie. So jigsaw pieces that continue to change their shape, impossible to make them fit together because they're always changing, and thus none of them are actually any shapes at all. This isn't a jigsaw that can be put together. The puzzle itself is a lie. From here, though, we begin to see the paradoxical nature of this album. Track 3 mentions that they want to awaken themselves and free themselves of restraint and escape a slavery. And track 4 says non-physical smothering, asphyxiation by oxygen hands drowning in the sky, an ever downward dive. This idea of paradoxes, of things that typically cannot be. You can't asphyxiate by oxygen hands. You can't run out of oxygen if you're surrounded by oxygen, is something that so much of the middle of this album is built around. It's, for me, what I think kind of, I'm sure musically it has some sort of artistic presence to it. And an illusion for the difficulties of all of this, or maybe the impossibility of it, trying to wrap your mind around stuff that doesn't make sense in order to find enlightenment. I have no idea what they're going for, but they really lean into it. And it takes a while until things start to form into ideas that will help take us to the end of the album. We see in Entrapment, he mentions a mutiny of the self, incapable by physical, or incapacitated by physical thoughts, acting out the will of tendon and bone. Have the bridges of insanity been crossed and forever retracted? I'm standing among 1,000 selves, is the multitude of laughters mine alone? And here, I wonder if they're talking about how multifaceted people can be. That we are not really just one of ourselves, but many. All of the masks that we wear around different types of people, code switching, all sorts of elements of how society crafts who we are on the outside and how that may differ from who we are on the inside. What is and isn't acceptable within specific social groups. That we are, by definition, of multitudes. But is it also about how we are all human? We are all multiple sides of humanity. He says, I stand among 1,000 selves. Is that about the self being fractured into 1,000, or the self being a part of 1,000? Not necessarily within, but without. I don't know. There is, like I said, a lot of things in here that lean towards at least the illusion of profundity, but it never really describes it. It simply presents this, says, oh, this sounds pretty smart, and leaves it at that. And I suppose it's up to the viewer, the listener of this, to determine if Meshuggah is actually being incredibly philosophical here, or just putting some seemingly smart but shallow things down. There is this idea that is presented about living through one's own shadow, and around this point I began to think, oh, so the Meshuggah vocalist or lyricist, usually the vocalist or the lyricist, but it doesn't have to be, I suppose. The lyricist must be into Jungian psychology, just like Maynard is from over in Tool. In fact, the more that I read the lyrics here, I was like, dude, I think Tool could have written these lyrics. They have that same air to them where they're certainly talking about more philosophical topics, and they present some stuff as if they're a bit well read on the topics, but it never really comes to a strong conclusion. It's more about, I have this surface level knowledge of this, so let's make a song about it. And it sounds smart, but does it have depth to it? And that's where I am with Meshuggah too. Also, any Tool fans who made it past the 52-minute mark, I'm going to see a sharp drop off here as well. I can't help myself. Geez. It talks about treacherous deceit from within, having to lose yourself until all the reasons of why we wanted to do this are forgotten. We must live through one's own shadow, muted and blind to really see that the reflection of the golden mirror will set us free. From here, we go a little bit back into the paradoxes. It says that the cloaked innocent guilt is imminently visible. Is it innocent or guilty? It is both. Is it cloaked or visible? It is both. It says, I'm trampled by the ferocious raging crowds of solitude. Is it crowded or are you alone? He then says that he has been extradited to the gods of chance, that the deities of all things random, alive and multicolored, are twitching in their dead monochrome world. This is interesting because it brings entropy into the mix, and I'm not sure how or why it fits in. It's sort of just left here. I'm kind of hoping there is more to that. The idea of opening your third eye and expanding yourself spiritually and having a deeper understanding of what it is that, you know, is the human condition, of why we're here, and then bringing entropy into the mix. Yeah, dude, like, that is a cool direction. Tell me about it. How does spirituality and understanding of life mix with chaos and randomness? Introduce that to me. I'd like to know. It sounds like a pretty cool, thesis idea here. Explain it to me. They don't. They never bring up the deities of all things random again. I'm a little upset about that, because now I'm over here thinking, well, what would that connection be? And I'm trying to write my own story based around what they've introduced to me. They brought it up. They should have been telling me about this. He says that all things are vivid in an iridescent world of gray. It's that his thoughts become a radiant beacon to the hunter-god radar, and he becomes them. He becomes teeth and must kill, feasting on the self. The destruction of the self through the eyes and connection with them, whatever them is, maybe some sort of gods or the vivid things of the world. I don't know. This album jumps between ideas so rapidly, and I think a lot of that is because there's so much space and instrumental work between verses, between stanzas, that the connection might be music based, but the music didn't tell me anything in here. All of the music is what I expect Meshuggah to write. It's not like I could hear narrative elements or emotive elements in it. It is just rhythmically textured. And Meshuggah, it's djent. Djent doesn't tell me things. Djent is something to groove to. Then we have several repetitions of floating through physical thoughts, landing in a statement of lying to maintain the equilibrium. I am forever unredeemed. But a new level has been reached. The absence of air lets me breathe. I'm inverted electrical impulses, a malfunctioning death code, incomplete. All things before me at first, unliving glimpse, undeciphered. Its semantics rid of logic. Nothing is all, and all is contradiction. I believe he dies here. If we are talking about people, human condition, living organisms, inverted electrical impulses would be negative. And we have electrical impulses that, I mean, I was just funny enough talking about this earlier when I made the joke about having mastery over the song to learn to perform it by running electricity through this meat in order to play something complex like this. Our bodies are run on electricity. If you invert that, you have no more electricity in the body. That's a state of death. He also calls it a death code. He says that he becomes unliving, and his first unliving glimpse is undeciphered. He can't figure out what he's looking at in death. And through this, he realizes that nothing is all, and all is contradiction. And contradiction is what this entire thing has been made up of. Catch-22 is kind of contradictory. It is a paradox of sorts. The only way out of a situation is nullified by the situation itself. There is no solution for this situation. So he describes life or existence as a giant contradiction. We took a long way to get here and through some interesting topics that felt like they should be working themselves and funneling into this topic well, but none of them have been explored in any way to really tie everything together. They're touched on, says, think about this, think about that, think about this, also this. And the threads really need to be there. It feels more performative than analytical to me. And I think that's kind of my big issue with a lot of this, is they bring up a lot of topics and then purposefully decide not to tie them together, which could be a way of being more abstract, but also feels like they don't have the understanding to tie it all together for me. And through the process of art, they say, I've put everything there. You just need to put the work in and figure it out. And, you know, sure, absolutely. Art that leaves a little bit to the imagination is fantastic, but this is making the imagination do a lot of heavy lifting. It calls everything a stagnant flow of endings that are untime, unbound, merging to form the multi-none. A dance of matter that is sickly and malignantly benign. Again, contradictions. You can't be benign and malignant. It finishes with 4 lines. Vision will blind, severance ties, medium am I, true are all lies, which are all contradictions. And that's kind of put us in the same place we were in the middle, except there the contradictions were baffling and here they're accepted as true. And they did that because they arose spiritually and died and saw the afterlife. And now the contradictions which once baffled them are obviously true. They have a heightened sense of perception of reality. And they see that the contradictions aren't a puzzle to be solved, but are just the state things are in. And okay, sure, you went a long way to say nothing, really. I don't know, dude. It feels like the album. It does a lot of stuff and ultimately says nothing to me. It's groovy in places. Sure, I can take Meshuggah in small spurts. You give me some of, that 5-minute opener, I probably would have had a lot of good things to say about it. Maybe would have talked about the repetition. Sure, not perfect, but it's groovy. That's what they do really well. But 47 minutes of doing the same thing and trying to tell me that it all means something different feels exactly like what the lyrics are doing. Touching on a lot of things that are tangentially related, but not actually giving me the tangents. If this were an essay, it would be shunned out of whatever society that it was written for, because it's just not well supported. It's a bunch of initial ideas with no supporting ideas to talk about them, to explore them, to tie them into the next stanza or the next paragraph. It is, in a lot of ways, interestingly vapid. And unfortunately, the music starts to lean that way too, aside from the puzzle element that I think is still a really cool part of Djent in general, but it ultimately just becomes a lot of the same thing over and over that is technically impressive, but in the moment, subjectively boring. These are my thoughts on Meshuggah's Catch 33. What did you think, though? Did you enjoy it? Did you disagree with me? Oh man, let me know. Put your thoughts down in the comments. If there's anything I need to be corrected on, anything you want to expand on what I said, you got your own perspective or opinion on it, put it down there. Anything else you'd like to add, throw that down there too. I read every comment. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.